When I moved into the Astorfield apartments, I didn't expect luxury, but I did expect normal. The building was old, the kind that had probably been beautiful in the 1960s, with its mosaic tiles and brass mailboxes that hadn't been polished in decades. My new place, Unit 5, was small but neat, with a single long window facing the courtyard and a full-length mirror fixed to the living room wall. The mirror had been there before I arrived, embedded into the plaster like it had always belonged. The manager, Mrs. Finch, told me it couldn't be removed without damaging the wall. "Think of it as character," she'd said with a laugh. The first night, I didn't think much about it. I unpacked, made noodles, and fell asleep to the hum of the ceiling fan. But around 2:30 a.m., I woke up thirsty and walked to the kitchen. Passing the mirror, I froze. Someone was standing behind my reflection. It was faint, a shape more than a person, tall, unmoving, right where the sofa was in the reflection. But when I turned around, the room was empty, the air was still. I told myself it was exhaustion. I'd been working double shifts, living on caffeine and nerves. The next morning, sunlight made the place seem harmless again. That evening, though, something felt wrong. The light in the hallway flickered every time I passed the mirror. When I brushed my teeth, I heard a faint tapping, not from the pipes, but from behind the mirror. I knocked back once, half-jokingly. 3 knocks answered. That night, I dreamt of the apartment as it used to be. The wallpaper was darker, the furniture different, old-fashioned, heavy wood, and a woman sat on the same couch I'd bought secondhand from a thrift store. Her head was turned toward the mirror. When I woke, my reflection was still staring at the wall a second too long after I'd moved. The next day, I called Mrs. Finch and asked who'd lived here before me. She hesitated. "It's been empty a while. There was an older tenant years back who, well, she passed away here. Heart failure, they said." "Here?" I asked. "In Unit 5. But don't worry, love. That sort of thing happens in old buildings." That night, the tapping began again. Rhythmic, urgent. When I leaned close, I realized it wasn't coming from behind the mirror. It was coming through it. And faintly, beneath the knocks, a voice whispered, "You're standing where I died." After that first whisper, I couldn't sleep. Every shadow in my apartment seemed heavier, darker. By the third night, I stopped looking directly at the mirror, but it was impossible to avoid. It dominated the living room wall, reflecting the faint glow of my bedside lamp even from across the room. Around midnight, I heard it again, soft knocking, almost like fingernails tapping the glass. My heart thumped so hard I thought the neighbors would hear it. I approached slowly, gripping the edge of the sofa for courage, and then I noticed something impossible. The reflection wasn't the same as my apartment. The couch appeared older, worn, and darker, its cushions sagging in places mine didn't. The window showed a dim gray light, although it was pitch black outside, and the ceiling fan, which normally rotated lazily above me, wasn't moving in the reflection at all. I blinked, took a step back. The reflection mimicked me exactly, until I turned sharply, trying to face it head-on. My mirrored self didn't move, frozen, watching me. I swallowed hard. "Hello?" I whispered. The reflection tilted its head almost imperceptibly. Then I noticed it, the shape of a woman standing behind the mirror self. Her hair was long and tangled, her eyes hollow black voids that reflected nothing. The faint outline of her body shimmered, like smoke twisting in the light. I stumbled back. The knocking turned into scraping now, as if claws were dragged slowly across the glass. I wanted to run, but my feet felt glued to the floor. Then a soft, wet voice whispered, just beneath the scrape, "Don't leave me here." I stumbled toward the bedroom, grabbing my phone, hoping for a signal. But there was none. Dead. I tried to call the manager, but even my text messages failed. The scraping stopped suddenly. I turned back toward the mirror. The reflection had changed again. Now the apartment behind my mirrored self wasn't empty. Furniture was overturned, walls were scratched, and dark stains covered the floor. stains that weren't in my actual apartment. A sudden chill enveloped me. My breath formed clouds in the air, though the heat had been on all day. And then I saw it. My reflection, slowly raising a hand, not in sync with mine. Frozen with fear, I noticed a small detail I hadn't before. In the mirrored apartment, there was a door I didn't have. A tiny door embedded into the far wall, black and warped. And something dark pressed against it from the other side, moving just slightly, like it was trying to escape. I backed away, heart hammering. Then the mirror vibrated, ever so slightly, as if something was pushing from the other side. A low, guttural hum filled the apartment, rising to a high-pitched wail. I wanted to smash it, destroy it, anything. But when I swung at the glass with my fist, my hand passed through like air. And then I realized the worst part. The whispering had multiplied. Now it came from every wall, every shadow. "You're trapped with me." I didn't sleep that night. Every sound, the hum of the heater, the creak of the floorboards, even the distant siren from the street, set my nerves on edge. I couldn't stop thinking about the mirror. The reflection wasn't just different, it was alive. By morning, I'd convinced myself it had to be a hallucination, something caused by stress. I tried to focus on work, but my laptop refused to connect to the Wi-Fi. My phone had no signal. Even the building's old intercom system was dead. Isolation settled around me like a fog. That night, I sat in front of the mirror, unwilling to leave, gripping the arm of my chair like it would keep me anchored to reality. I whispered, "Who are you?" The reflection remained still. Then slowly, impossibly, it smiled, a thin, cruel line stretching wider than it should. The woman behind it moved closer, her hollow eyes fixed on me, pressing against the glass from the other side. I tried to step back. My foot hit the wall, and for a second, I felt the floor tilt. The room seemed to breathe. The reflection stretched, the mirrored apartment expanding beyond the confines of the glass. And then the mirror shimmered. The surface rippled like water, drawing me in. I staggered, almost falling. A voice hissed directly into my ear, though no one was behind me. "Step closer, we've been waiting." I felt a pull, magnetic and terrifying, tugging at my chest. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't respond. The mirrored hand extended, reaching toward me. Every instinct screamed, "Don't touch it." Yet the air between me and the glass grew warmer, thick, almost liquid. I remembered what Mrs. Finch had said about the previous tenant, the one who died here. Something about her death had been sudden, but no one had ever explained the details. Curiosity overpowered fear. I whispered, "What happened here?" The reflection's lips moved, forming words I could hear clearly in my mind. I didn't leave. I couldn't. I backed away, tripping over the sofa. When I looked again, the reflection wasn't mine anymore. The apartment behind it was dark, decaying, walls blackened, floors cracked, and shadows crawling like living things. And there, at the far corner, a figure lurked, almost invisible except for its glowing eyes. I realized then the truth. The mirror didn't just reflect, it contained. The woman, the figure, the distorted apartment. They were trapped inside. And now, the mirror had noticed me. It began to hum, low and menacing, vibrating the glass with a force that made my teeth chatter. I clutched the armrest, knowing I had to escape. But when I turned toward the door, it slammed shut on its own, shaking the frame. The whispers multiplied, circling me. "You're next. Stay forever. Join us." I ran to the kitchen, grabbed a knife from the drawer and swung at the glass. But it passed through like water again. My reflection grinned back, now fully independent, mocking me. The air around the mirror thickened, a tangible pressure pushing me forward. I felt my body drawn toward it like I was stepping into ice-cold water. Panic overtook me. I screamed, yanking backward, falling onto the floor. The whispers stopped. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then, softly, almost kindly, the voice returned. Come closer, or you'll never leave. I knew then that the mirror wasn't just a surface. It was a prison, and someone, or something, had been waiting for a new tenant to join the others. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound, every shadow, every flicker of light from the street seemed amplified, as if the apartment itself was alive and watching me. I stayed crouched in the corner of the living room, knife in hand, staring at the mirror that had begun to pulse like a heartbeat. By 2 a.m., the whispers returned, louder, more insistent. The mirrored reflection no longer mimicked me. It had a life of its own. The woman's hollow eyes glimmered with something ancient, something patient. The shadows behind her began moving, writhing like smoke, and the apartment in the glass had fully decayed. Broken furniture, peeling wallpaper, and the dark figure in the corner glared at me, its glowing eyes fixed. I remembered something Mrs. Finch had said when I'd asked about the previous tenant. She was very private, didn't like visitors. No one knows why she disappeared. Now I realized disappeared wasn't a euphemism. The apartment had consumed her. And the mirror? It was a doorway. The air thickened, pulling me toward the glass. I felt weightless, almost floating. My knife passed through the reflection uselessly. The whispers swirled around my head. Come with us. Stay forever. Join the others. Fear propelled me into action. I ran to the balcony, praying the glass door would open. It did, with a grinding screech that echoed through the building. The cold night air slapped my face. I stumbled over the threshold and jumped to the fire escape below. My hands scraped the metal rails, my heart hammering. The mirror's pulsing hum followed me, distant yet penetrating, as if it had reached beyond the walls of the apartment. Once on the ground, I ran. The streets were empty, silent, and the city lights blurred into streaks as I didn't stop until the next block. When I dared to look back, the Asterfield apartment seemed normal from the outside, quiet, inert, lifeless. But I knew better. The mirror waited, patient and eternal. The next day, I returned briefly to gather essentials. Mrs. Finch met me at the entrance. Her smile was calm, almost knowing. Leaving so soon? She asked. Unit 5 has a way of keeping people. I didn't answer. I didn't want to hear her say it. Inside the apartment, the mirror was dark, still, betraying no hint of the horrors it contained. I moved my things into a new building that afternoon, far from the Asterfield. But sometimes, late at night, when the lights are off and the world is quiet, I swear I hear faint humming, that same low, untuned, patient vibration. Sometimes when I pass a reflective surface, I catch a glimpse of her eyes, the woman trapped, watching, waiting. And I know the truth now. The mirror doesn't just reflect. It waits. Always. For the next tenant to stand still long enough, and then it claims them. I never sleep facing a mirror again. I never trust a reflection, and I know I'll never fully escape what lurks on the other side. When I first moved into the building on Elmhurst Avenue, I told myself it was only temporary, a stopgap between lives. The rent was low, the walls were beige, and the windows never opened all the way. But it was quiet enough for me to think. After the breakup, quiet was all I wanted. Apartment 3C sat at the very end of the hall, across from a flickering exit sign that buzzed like an insect trapped in glass. The floorboards creaked under every step, and the smell in the hallway was a strange mix of bleach and damp wood. The manager, Mr. Lockwood, was an older man with small, patient eyes and a thin silver watch he kept checking, even when no one was late. When I signed the lease, he said, "Keep to yourself and you'll be fine." The apartment next to mine, 3B, had been locked since the day I moved in. "No tenant," Lockwood told me. "That one's sealed off." He didn't say why. The first few weeks passed quietly enough. I worked, cooked instant noodles, and fell asleep to the hum of the refrigerator. I even began to like the silence. It felt like a clean break from everything I'd left behind. But then one night, something changed. It was close to midnight when I heard it. A faint murmur behind the wall that separated my bedroom from the empty unit next door. At first I thought it was the plumbing. The sound came in soft bursts, like someone talking low into a phone. I pressed my ear against the wall. Room 2A, arrived 9:12, lights off 10:46. The voice was male, steady, calm, mechanical. Papers shuffled. Room 3C, awake at 12:03, observed listening. My blood ran cold. That was my room. I stepped back, heart pounding so hard I thought the walls might hear it. I stared at the plaster, waiting for another sound, but the voice stopped. The silence that followed felt thick enough to choke on. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the building made me jump. I told myself it was stress, a bad dream, a trick of old wiring and insomnia. But in the morning, when I stepped into the hallway, something new caught my eye. The padlock on 3B's door hung loose, the padlock on 3B's door wasn't just loose. It was open, hanging there, still hooked through the latch but unlatched, like someone had unlocked it in a hurry and forgotten to finish the job. I hesitated, staring at it for a long moment. The hallway was empty, except for the low hum of fluorescent lights and the faint smell of cleaning chemicals. Every instinct told me to turn around, to pretend I hadn't seen anything. But curiosity has a way of disguising itself as courage. I reached out and nudged the door with my fingertips. It creaked open an inch, then another, revealing only darkness inside. "Mr. Lockwood?" I called softly. No answer. I pushed the door wider. The air that drifted out was cold, stale, like a room sealed for years. I could make out faint outlines, a small table, a chair, and stacks of cardboard boxes covered in dust. The blinds were drawn tight, letting in only a sliver of gray morning light. It didn't look like a lived-in apartment, it looked like a storage room. And then I saw it. A camera tripod facing the shared wall between 3B and my room. No camera attached, just the mount, positioned perfectly at head height. Beneath it, on the floor, lay a scatter of cassette tapes and a small tape recorder with red smudges on the play button. I crouched down, hesitating only a second before pressing play. A hiss of static filled the silence, followed by that same voice from the night before, calm, methodical, emotionless. Subject 3C, awake, observing. Attempted contact through wall unsuccessful. My throat went dry. There was a long pause, then faint scratching sounds. Maybe writing. Initiate next phase. Visual entry. I dropped the recorder so fast it clattered against the concrete. Footsteps echoed in the hallway behind me. I spun around. It was Mr. Lockwood. He stood at the threshold holding a ring of keys, his face unreadable. "You shouldn't be in here," he said quietly. I heard something last night," I stammered. There's recordings in here. Someone's been watching me." His eyes shifted toward the tripod, then back to me. "That's impossible. No one's used this room in years." I could hear my pulse in my ears. "Then why's it unlocked?" Lockwood stepped inside, his shoes making soft sounds on the dusty floor. He picked up the recorder, turned it over in his hand, then smiled. A small, practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Probably kids," he said. "We get vandals sometimes." He slipped the recorder into his pocket before I could stop him. Something in his expression made my stomach twist. It wasn't fear. It was familiarity. He'd known about it. He gestured toward the hallway. "Let's get you back to your apartment, all right? You look pale." As I stepped past him, I glanced back once more. The tripod had shifted. It was now facing the doorway, directly at me. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I thought I heard the tape spinning again, the quiet hiss of static leaking through the walls. Around 3 a.m., I grabbed a flashlight and checked every corner of my apartment. Under the bed, behind the fridge, even inside the vents. That's when I saw it. a tiny black dot near the ceiling vent, barely visible unless the light hit it at the right angle. It looked like a screw, except screws don't blink red. A camera. I climbed on a chair and pried it out with a butter knife. The lens cracked under pressure, revealing wires no thicker than hair. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped it. Who the hell put surveillance cameras in an apartment? I barely waited for sunrise before I stormed down to the front office. Lockwood was there, as calm as ever, sipping coffee and reading a newspaper that looked too old to be real. "You said this place was safe," I snapped, slamming the tiny camera onto his desk. "What the hell is this?" He looked at it for a long moment, then gave me a tired sigh. "That isn't supposed to be in your unit." "Supposed to be?" I said. "So you do know about them?" He folded the newspaper, aligning the edges perfectly before speaking. "There are systems here older than either of us. Some rooms were part of a monitoring experiment long before I took over." "Monitoring?" I repeated. "By who?" He didn't answer, just said, "It's better if you don't touch anything you find. They don't like interference." "Who's they?" I asked. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I swear his pupils flickered, just for a second, like a reflection from some unseen screen. "Don't make yourself interesting, kid," he said softly. "Curiosity gets logged." That afternoon, I packed a bag. I didn't care about the deposit. I just wanted out. But when I tried to leave, the elevator refused to go down. It opened on every floor except the lobby. By the time I reached the stairwell, my phone buzzed. No signal, just a single notification flashing across the screen. From unknown. Message. Room 3C attempting exit, observation continuing. My blood froze. I dropped the phone, but it kept buzzing, vibrating across the concrete floor as new messages appeared in rapid bursts. Monitor active. Subject distressed. Stage 3 authorized. I bolted back to my apartment, but the door to 3B was open again. And this time light was pouring out of it, a bright, pulsing white that hummed like machinery. The light spilling from 3B pulsed like a heartbeat. White, then blue, then white again. My instincts screamed to run, but something about it held me in place. It wasn't just light. It was sound, faint and layered, like whispers buried under static. I stepped closer. Inside, the apartment didn't look abandoned anymore. The walls were lined with equipment, screens, speakers, black boxes stacked in neat grids. On every screen was me. Different angles, sleeping, eating, standing by the window. Even now, a live feed of me standing in the doorway, bathed in that awful light. I stumbled backward, slamming into the frame. "Room 3C, a familiar mechanical voice said from one of the speakers, has achieved full awareness." My stomach dropped. It was the same voice I'd heard through the wall. Calm, detached, observing. "Who are you?" I shouted. My voice echoed strangely, like the room swallowed the sound before giving it back. "Observer 3C is not authorized to question origin." Something shifted behind the screens, movement, like silhouettes on the other side of frosted glass. I caught flashes of hands, long and pale, adjusting knobs and switches. "I'm leaving," I said, backing away. "I don't care what this is." The voice responded instantly. "Departure denied. Data integrity not secured." Then every monitor flickered. The images changed, no longer showing me but other people. Dozens of them. Men, women, kids, all sitting in rooms that looked identical to mine. Some stared blankly at walls. Some screamed. One woman pressed her hands against the screen, mouthing words I couldn't hear. My chest went tight. "Subjects 1A through 3F active," the voice continued. "Observation cycle complete. Prepare for merge." The air thickened. That pulsing light turned blinding. The hum deepened until it vibrated in my bones. My reflection appeared on the largest screen, except it wasn't quite me. The face moved half a second out of sync, smiling when I didn't. And then it spoke. "You shouldn't have opened the door." The light surged forward, swallowing everything. For a split second, I felt weightless, like falling through a signal instead of air. When I woke up, I was on my couch. Morning sunlight streamed through the window. The alarm clock blinked 8:02 a.m. For a moment, I thought I'd dreamed it all. The hallway was quiet. My phone showed no strange messages, and the door to 3B was padlocked again. But when I turned on the TV, the screen stayed black, except for a faint reflection. It was me. Only I wasn't moving. My reflection blinked a full 3 seconds after I did, then tilted its head and smiled. Room 3C. A soft voice whispered from the static. Observation complete. I had never planned on living alone in that tiny house on Willow Lane. It was a pale yellow bungalow, the kind with a narrow porch and a mailbox perched like a bird at the curb. I'd moved there after my breakup, thinking a quiet place with cheap rent would help me sort out my life. The neighborhood was sleepy, the kind where kids rode bikes until sunset, and neighbors waved from their driveways, nodding politely, and then retreating behind manicured hedges. That Friday started like any other. I woke around noon, groggy from a late shift at the local print shop. Sunlight spilled through the blinds, dust motes drifting lazily in the golden glow. I brewed coffee and made a sandwich, scrolling through my phone, half paying attention to the news. By 2, I realized I needed a few things from the corner store. Eggs, bread, some canned soup. Nothing major, a 5-minute walk at most. Outside, the street was calm. I waved at Mrs. Holloway, my elderly neighbor tending her tulips, and kept walking. A car passed slowly, the driver's gaze lingering on me longer than normal. I shrugged it off. People in the suburbs stared sometimes. Inside the store, I grabbed my items quickly. That's when I noticed 2 men loitering near the snack aisle. One was tall, his brown jacket stained and worn, dark hair flopping across his forehead. The other was shorter, heavier, with a scar along his jaw that caught the fluorescent light. They were laughing quietly, eyes flicking toward me repeatedly. Something about the way they moved, too deliberate, too aware, made my stomach tighten. When I returned outside, my instincts screamed. They were waiting by a rusty sedan, doors ajar. As I passed, the tall one stepped forward, brushing my shoulder. "Hey there," he said, his voice calm but laced with something cold. I nodded stiffly and walked faster, feeling their gaze burn into my back. By the time I reached my driveway, my heart was racing. I locked the door behind me, double-checking it before entering. The rest of the afternoon passed uneventfully, or so I thought. I unpacked groceries, watered the small row of plants on my porch, and eventually settled into the living room with a book. The sun dipped low, shadows stretching across the beige walls, and I almost laughed at myself for feeling anxious. Almost. Around 10:15 p.m., a sound froze me. Footsteps on gravel outside. Slow, measured, deliberate. My first thought, the neighbors. But it wasn't their usual shuffle. These were too heavy, and they stopped at my front gate. I froze, straining to see through the blinds. The streetlight illuminated 2 figures. The scarred one crouched, scanning the windows. The taller one stood rigid, gloved hands in pockets, staring directly at the door. I held my breath, crouched behind the sofa, my phone pressed against my ear, ready to dial 911. My hand trembled, not just from fear, but from the realization that these weren't random drunks. They knew my house. They had been watching. The tall one tried the front doorknob. The lock rattled under his grip. My stomach churned. The shorter man circled to the side, heading toward the sliding glass door leading to the backyard. I had never felt more exposed, more trapped. I thought about my grandfather's old hunting rifle tucked behind the bedroom door. I had never used it, never even cleaned it properly. Now, it felt like my only lifeline. I edged toward the hallway, keeping low, careful to avoid any reflection in the windows. The floor creaked beneath my weight, each sound echoing in the quiet house. Through the blinds, I saw the taller one pulling something from his coat. Lock-picking tools. The shorter man was jiggling the kitchen door, murmuring curses under his breath. My pulse hammered. Every instinct screamed at me. Move. Fight. Survive. I grabbed the rifle, pumping it once to chamber a round. The metallic click sounded deafening in the living room. Instantly, the taller man froze, his head snapping toward the window. The flashlight in his hand swung toward the glass, illuminating his wide, startled eyes. His companion froze as well, caught in the beam. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then chaos. They bolted, sprinting back toward the street. Gravel crunched beneath their boots as they ran. I peered through the blinds just long enough to see them leap into the sedan and peel away, tires squealing as they vanished down the lane. My hands shook so badly I dropped the rifle. It clattered against the floor. I stayed crouched for what felt like hours, heart pounding, listening for any sound of return. Only the distant hum of a street lamp broke the silence. Slowly, I moved through the house, checking every door, every window. Signs of attempted entry were clear, the front door lock scratched, the backyard latch loosened, fingerprints on the glass. By the time the police arrived, my nerves were frayed to raw threads. 2 officers, young but professional, took statements and pictures. Officer Benson asked if I had surveillance footage. I admitted I didn't. They promised to check local cameras and patrol the area. I showed them the marks, the jiggled locks, every evidence of the intrusion attempt. They warned me to upgrade security, install cameras, and consider motion sensor lighting. The rest of the night, I stayed in my bedroom, rifle across my lap, listening to every creak, every distant bark, every passing car. Sleep came only in short, fitful bursts. Over the next days, I transformed the house. Deadbolts on every door, motion sensor lights around the perimeter, a new lock on the sliding door. I even installed a small security camera system, checking the feeds obsessively during my breaks at work. I varied my parking routine, changed grocery store runs, and paid attention to every vehicle that lingered too long in the neighborhood. 2 weeks later, Officer Benson called. They had caught them, Robert Hanley and Vincent Russo, after trying to break into another house across town. The homeowner's dog had gone ballistic, alerting the family, and they had called police. It turned out they had a string of burglaries planned, targeting houses where they knew people were alone. Videos found on Russo's phone included several homes, including mine. Even with them arrested, nights were hard. I could still hear phantom footsteps, see shadows out of the corner of my eyes. That's when I adopted a pit bull mix, Brutus, a gentle giant who barked ferociously at any unexpected sound. Somehow, his presence grounded me, gave me a sense of security I hadn't had since that night. The nights that followed were tense. Every creak in the house, every squeak from the porch set my heart racing. I double-checked the locks constantly. Brutus became my constant companion, lying at the foot of the bed, growling at the slightest noise. I told myself it was temporary, just until I felt safe again. Weeks passed. Slowly, I adjusted. Work went on, life continued, and the neighborhood returned to its usual quiet rhythm. But the memory of that night never faded. I saw the sedan in dreams, the tall man's yellowed teeth grinning at me, the scarred one recording everything. Even in daylight, I would glance at parked cars with unease, watching for any suspicious movement. I began noticing small things around the house. A misplaced plant, a door slightly ajar that I was sure I had locked, shadows that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking. Every sound became amplified. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, Brutus's nails clicking on the hardwood. Then one night, I noticed something on the camera feed, a figure walking past the street outside. Brutus barked furiously, hair standing on end. I zoomed in. The figure was too tall, too thin, gloved hands hanging loosely. My pulse hit my throat. I ran outside, calling out, but the street was empty. The wind had carried the figure away. Or so I hoped. After that, I stopped going out alone at night. Grocery runs were done in daylight. I never let anyone know I was home alone. Even after Hanley and Russo were behind bars, the unease lingered, like a shadow stretching across my life. Months later, Officer Benson called with court updates. Hanley had received a 3-year sentence. Russo, 18 months. Their victims spoke in court, detailing the break-ins, the videos, the hours of stalking. I was relieved justice was done, but it didn't erase the feeling that someone had been watching, calculating, and waiting for the perfect moment. I eventually moved to a second-floor apartment with a single entrance and a doorman. It felt safe, yet I still kept Brutus with me. I installed cameras, motion lights, and reinforced locks. Old habits die hard, and fear leaves a mark. Sometimes in the dead of night I would wake and think I heard footsteps outside. Gravel shifting, a door rattling. My body tensed, but it was only the wind or Brutus moving in his sleep. Yet deep down, I knew how fragile a sense of security could be. A Tuesday afternoon, milk and bread, the wrong place at the wrong time. Anyone could be chosen. Anyone could be watched. Even now I glance at the street from my window, careful who drives slowly past, careful who parks and lingers. Life has returned, but vigilance became a part of me. And in some ways, I am grateful. That night I learned that safety isn't given. It's earned. Earned with locks, lights, dogs, and most importantly, awareness. The shadows may linger, but so do I. When I moved into the third-floor apartment of the Birchwood complex, I told myself it was temporary. 6 months, maybe less. A clean place, decent rent, close enough to Caleb's new school that I could walk him there every morning. For a single parent, that kind of convenience feels like winning the lottery. The building itself wasn't bad, just old. The paint on the hallway railings peeled like brittle paper, and the elevator groaned like a man waking from a nap it didn't want to end. Still, the neighbors were quiet, and the lease said no pets, which I considered a plus. The first odd thing happened on the second night. I'd just put Caleb to bed. He liked his nightlight shaped like a rocket, and was washing a few dishes when I heard it. A steady thump, thump, thump from below. Not loud but deliberate, like someone was pacing with heavy boots. It went on for almost a minute, then stopped abruptly. The downstairs apartment had been vacant when we moved in. The landlord even mentioned it. Been empty a while, he'd said. Last tenant left mid-lease, no forwarding address. I figured maybe someone new had moved in. But the next day, there was still no car parked in that spot. No light from the windows below. Still, that night, thump, thump, again, same rhythm, same spot under the living room. I shrugged it off as pipes, or the old building settling. Telling yourself it's nothing helps when you're the only adult in the house. By the end of the week, the noise had turned into a pattern. Every night around 9:30 and after dishes, after Caleb's bedtime, the thumping started. Sometimes it lasted 30 seconds, sometimes longer, but it always stopped the moment I walked toward the window. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I leaned over the balcony railing, peering down at the second floor. All I saw was darkness. No lights, no sound, just the faint hum of the streetlights and the wind scraping leaves across the parking lot. The next morning I asked the maintenance guy, Rick, if someone had moved in below me. He shook his head. Nah, still empty. I check that unit once a week. Locks are sealed. Power's still disconnected. Then who's... I started but stopped when he laughed. These old floors carry sound weird, he said. Could be from another building. Happens all the time. It didn't feel like all the time. The noise seemed too specific, too aware of me. That night after Caleb fell asleep, I tried a little experiment. I stomped twice on my floorboards, right over the living room spot, and waited. 3 seconds later, 2 slow thuds answered back. My breath caught. I wanted to believe it was coincidence, but deep down I knew it wasn't. The reply felt intentional. I shut off the lights and sat on the couch, waiting, listening to the faint groan of wood under invisible feet. At 10:04, the thudding stopped again, right when it usually did. I checked my phone, heart pounding, half expecting a text from some unknown number. Nothing. Only silence. 2 days later, a notice appeared taped to my door. Scheduled pest control. Unit 2B access required. That was the apartment beneath me. My pulse quickened. Finally, a chance to see it for myself. When the exterminator arrived, a tired-looking man in a blue jumpsuit, I asked if I could tag along. "Just curious," I said. "I keep hearing noises from that unit." He shrugged and unlocked the door. The air inside was stale, heavy with dust and something faintly metallic. The place was bare. No furniture, no curtains, just gray carpet and yellowed walls. The only thing left behind was a child's drawing, tacked crookedly to the wall near the kitchen. A stick figure with a round black head and long lines for arms. Beneath it in faded crayon were the words, "He lives under the floor." The exterminator noticed my expression. "Creepy, huh?" "Place gives me the chills too," he muttered, setting down his gear. I nodded, pretending to smile, and left quickly, but that drawing stayed burned into my mind. That night, I locked every window, checked on Caleb twice, and sat in bed scrolling through my phone just to hear noise. But around 9:30, the thumping began again. Louder this time, slower, like someone dragging something heavy. Caleb stirred in his room. "Mom," he whispered down the hall. "It's okay, baby," I called back. "Just the building settling." But even as I said it, I could hear the thuds shifting, moving from beneath the living room to under his room. Each hit rattled the frame of his bed. Caleb screamed, and I was out of bed before I realized I'd moved. The thudding stopped the instant I touched his doorknob. Inside, he was sitting up crying, pointing at the floor. "It was knocking," he sobbed. "It said my name." The next morning I called the landlord. My voice shook as I described the sounds, the child's drawing, Caleb's fear. He sighed. "You're not the first to mention it," he said quietly. "But that unit's been empty since 2017. The woman who lived there, she lost her little boy. He fell through a rotten section of the subfloor and..." He didn't finish the sentence, and he didn't need to. That night, I refused to let Caleb sleep in his room. We set up his blankets in the living room, lights dimmed, cartoons running low on the TV. I thought maybe distraction would help. But at 9:31, the noise started again, right beneath us. Only this time it wasn't just thuds. It was a faint, breathy whisper pushing through the vents. "Caleb." He froze. His small hand gripped mine so tight my fingers went numb. I wanted to run, but something in that whisper rooted me to the couch. It wasn't angry. It was pleading, mournful, like a child calling for help. I forced myself up, grabbed Caleb, and backed toward the door. My phone trembled in my other hand as I called 911, but before the dispatcher answered, the thuds began again, frantic now, shaking dust from the ceiling. Then, silence. The air stilled. The TV flickered once and went black. In the reflection of the blank screen behind me, I saw the carpet swell upward, just slightly, as though something beneath it was trying to push through. The door burst open. Rick, the maintenance man, stood there pale and wide-eyed. He'd heard the noise from the stairwell. "Out," he said. "Now." We ran, down the hall, down the stairs, out into the cold night air. When I looked back up at the third-floor window, the light in my apartment flicked on by itself. In the faint glow, I could see the shape of a small figure standing near the couch, unmoving, just watching us leave. The landlord boarded up the second-floor unit the next day. A week later, we moved out. Sometimes when the house gets quiet and Caleb's asleep, I still hear it, a single, hollow thump, as though someone beneath the floor just wants to be remembered. When we moved into the house on Wren Hollow Lane, it felt too quiet. Not peaceful quiet, empty quiet. The kind that hums behind your ears and makes you second-guess whether the silence itself is listening. Mom said it was perfect for a fresh start. After Dad's death last winter, she wanted out of the city, away from hospitals and sirens. The real estate agent had called it a hidden gem. 2 stories, built in the late 60s, surrounded by pine trees that cut off most of the sunlight. I was 17 and already hated it. The house smelled faintly of old books and damp wood, and every floorboard seemed to creak in complaint when you walked. The previous owners had left behind heavy drapes, antique furniture, and weirdly, a locked storage room in the basement with no key. Mom promised we'd get it changed later. The first few nights were fine. Then, small things started. The living room clock would stop exactly at 2:46 every night. The kitchen light would flicker once whenever you entered, just once, like it was greeting you. And sometimes the old landline in the hallway would ring once, a single sharp tone, even though it wasn't connected to anything. Mom said it was the wiring settling. I wanted to believe her. On the fifth night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps. Soft, deliberate, pacing right above my room. Mom's bedroom was across the hall, not upstairs. I froze, staring at the ceiling, counting each step. 5 one way, 5 back. Over and over. I finally worked up the nerve to check, clutching my phone flashlight. The stairs groaned under my weight, but the second floor was empty, a small storage hallway and 2 unused rooms. Both doors stood open. But there was a smell up there, faint and metallic, like blood that had dried long ago. When I went back down, I noticed something I hadn't before. The attic pull-down ladder in the ceiling was slightly lowered, just an inch. Like someone had been up there, or had just gone down. The next morning, Mom acted like nothing was wrong. She'd slept fine, she said, and brushed off my story with a tired smile. But when I told her about the attic, her face changed. The inspector said that space was sealed off years ago, she said slowly. It shouldn't even open anymore. That night, I put a chair under my doorknob before going to bed. On Saturday, it rained hard. The power went out around 9 p.m., plunging the house into that suffocating darkness that feels alive. Mom was at her night shift, so it was just me in the storm. I lit one of the old candles we'd found in a kitchen drawer. The flame burned low and crooked, smelling faintly of perfume and something sour underneath. Then came the creak. Not upstairs this time, and directly behind me. I turned slowly. The hallway was empty, but the candle flame bent sharply to the left, as if something had moved past me. My skin prickled. I whispered, "Hello?" Nothing, just rain hammering the roof. I went to the living room to grab my phone charger, and stopped dead. Someone had drawn the living room curtains open. We never left them open at night. Mom hated that. Outside, through the glass, I saw the faint reflection of a figure standing just behind me. I spun around. Empty room. The reflection was gone. I called Mom. No answer. The next morning, I found muddy footprints in the hallway, leading from the back door to the bottom of the attic ladder. Small, barefoot prints. Mom swore she hadn't been home early. That's when she finally told me about the note the realtor had given her but hadn't read out loud. Previous owner deceased. Accidental fall from attic stairs. The man had been found weeks later, in that same basement storage room, after neighbors complained about the smell. Mom said she didn't tell me because she didn't want to scare me. Too late. 2 nights later, the noises came back. This time, not footsteps. It was humming. A low, tuneless hum that moved through the ceiling. Soft, wandering. It started around midnight, grew louder until I could tell it was coming from inside the walls. I pressed my ear against the plaster and heard faint whispering beneath it. Words I couldn't make out. And then, clear as day, "Don't go down there." I didn't sleep at all. By morning, I had made up my mind. I was going to open that locked storage room in the basement. I waited until Mom left for work, then grabbed a hammer. The door was old, splintered. The lock rusted shut. After a few hits, the latch broke loose. The smell hit me first, thick and rotting like damp wood and mold mixed with something worse. The room was small, maybe 8 feet square. The walls were lined with yellowed newspaper, and the floor was covered with plastic sheeting. In the corner sat an old metal chair, and above it, deep gouges in the ceiling like something had been dragged upward. A dusty photo frame lay face down on the floor. I picked it up. Inside was a picture of our house. Same number, same porch, But the sighting was different, older, and standing on the porch was a man I'd never seen before. His face was smudged, like someone had tried to erase it. On the back of the photo, written in shaky ink, "Don't let him out again." That night, I told Mom everything. She stared at me for a long time, then said softly, "You should stay at your aunt's for a few days." I didn't argue. We packed my things that evening. But when Mom went to grab her purse from the kitchen, she froze. The attic ladder was down again, fully extended this time, and resting on the top step was the same photograph. But now, there were two people on the porch, the faceless man and my mother. We left that night. The police came the next morning after the realtor reported a break-in. The door had been found wide open, lights on, furnace running. They said the house was empty. No signs of forced entry, no footprints. Except for one thing. When the officer climbed up to the attic to make sure no one was hiding, he found a small space, unfinished wood, dust, insulation, and carved into the beam above the ladder, in uneven, jagged letters, "Still here." We never went back to Wren Hollow Lane, but last month Mom got a voicemail from an unknown number. Just one word whispered through static, "Downstairs." And the timestamp on the message, 2:46 a.m. Moving into that house was supposed to mark the beginning of something calm. After Mom passed, I needed a place that didn't breathe memories at me. So when the realtor showed me the little two-story on Brookline Drive, quiet street, fenced yard, cheap mortgage, I signed the papers before I could change my mind. It wasn't perfect. The wallpaper peeled at the corners, the basement smelled like damp concrete, and the upstairs hallway light flickered when it rained. But it was mine. After years of renting, I wanted somewhere that felt solid beneath my feet. The first week was ordinary. I unpacked boxes, fixed a leaky faucet, met my neighbor, Mrs. Fallon, a widow who watched the street from her porch like a security camera with knitting needles. At night, I'd read by the window and listened to cars pass on the highway beyond the trees. Then one morning, I noticed something strange. On the living room floor, right by the front door, were small dusty prints, like bare feet, smaller than mine. I checked the lock, the windows, the motion sensor light. All fine. Maybe dirt from movers, I told myself. Still, I swept it up and forgot about it. That night, I woke to a faint scraping sound downstairs, like furniture shifting a few inches at a time. When I checked, nothing had moved, except one thing. The old mirror that hung above the mantel was tilted slightly downward, as if someone my height had leaned close to it and smiled. A few quiet days passed, enough for me to start sleeping properly again. I bought a small indoor camera and placed it on the bookshelf facing the living room, more for peace of mind than real security. Thursday night, rain hammered the roof. Around 2:30 a.m., the sound of tapping woke me. Slow, deliberate taps against the window. I froze, too rhythmic to be rain. When I checked, no one was there, just wet glass and the reflection of my lamp. The next morning, I played back the camera feed. At 2:28 a.m., the lens caught movement near the hallway arch. A blurry figure, short, maybe a child, stepped into the frame. The figure stopped in front of the mirror and raised a hand toward it. Then static swallowed the image. I rewound, paused, zoomed, and saw my reflection move half a second after I did. That night, I called Mrs. Fallon. She told me the house used to belong to a couple who fostered children, decades ago. "Sad story," she said. "One of them went missing. They never found her. The police thought she ran away, but..." She trailed off, as if the rest didn't need saying. Saturday night, I decided to test a theory. I left the mirror covered with a bedsheet before going to bed. At 1:53 a.m., a soft knock echoed from downstairs. 3 slow knocks, not on the door, but on the wall behind my headboard. I didn't move. I just listened. Then came the whisper. Faint, but close. "Let me come home." I sat up, heart slamming. The whisper came again, muffled through the drywall. "I remember you." I stumbled to the stairs, phone light shaking in my hand. The living room was dark except for the glow from the camera's indicator. The sheet covering the mirror was gone. In its reflection, the couch looked empty, but behind me, a small figure stood at the top of the stairs. Bare feet, pale nightdress, tilted head. I turned around, but the steps were empty. When I looked back at the mirror, nothing, except my phone lying on the floor, screen cracked. It showed a single new notification. Motion detected. 1:54 a.m. I moved out 2 weeks later. My brother helped me box everything and we joked about my haunted suburban dream home. But the day I handed back the keys, I checked the security app one last time. There was a new file, time-stamped 2 nights earlier. I hadn't been in the house since. The footage showed my living room perfectly still. Then, from the edge of the frame, something crawled into view. Small, thin, moving on hands and knees. It stopped in front of the mirror, turned slowly and looked straight at the camera. Its eyes were bright and empty. Its mouth was open in that same strange smile. Then, in a soft, almost childlike voice, it whispered, "Do you remember me now?" The clip ended. I deleted the app. Bought a condo with no mirrors. But every few nights around 2 a.m., my new smart speaker wakes itself up. A child's voice whispers through it, barely audible. "Let me come home.